A warm Q welcome to Jessica. Sure.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that kind introduction and for having me here today. It's a treat to be here. It's even better to be outside of Washington and be in Palm Springs. It's not a hardship assignment. But I'm going to start right now by asking you to imagine that we're no longer in Palm Springs. I want to take you somewhere else where the sun's hot, the soil is warm, and the roads are dusty. I want you to imagine that you are in McAllen, Texas. I think there's a Texan in the room. You know, they're not shy. All right, McAllen is one of the southernmost cities in the United States, and it lies in the storied Rio Grande Valley. It sits right on the river itself, and in the last century, McAllen was devoted to agriculture. Its fields produced cotton, alfalfa, grapes, and figs, and in later years, its economy expanded a bit with oil exploration. And still later, given its proximity to Mexico, it became a foreign trade zone with cross-border commercial traffic, making it one of the fastest-growing metropolitan areas in the country. But like so many other places, this transition to a new economy has been uneven. Unemployment is high, and despite its history as a haven for agriculture, some of its communities lack fresh food and are what is known as food deserts. Diabetes is also high. So not every household or every neighborhood has found opportunity in what is new and what comes next. And that's painfully clear when you look at the students in the community. So let's take Isabella and Tony Ruiz. Isabella's 11 and her brother Tony is 12. And each weeknight, they stand on a crumbling patch of sidewalk by an elementary school within walking distance of their home. And they take up residence here every night in order to pick up the wireless signal they need to do their homework. So over the cracked screen of this family's smartphone, they download math materials and review research for class. So let's credit Isabella and Tony for their tenacity because their mother's out of work and their father brings in what income he can from washing dishes. Their families cut back on everything. So these students, like so many others in the community, cobble together whatever connectivity they can find for schoolwork. They may not know it, but standing on that cracked sidewalk in the South Texas heat, they are on the front lines of a new digital divide. And that divide did not exist when I was growing up. I mean, after all I needed for homework was a paper, a pencil, and my brother leaving me alone. And it was that third one that was the hardest. But gone are the days. Today, as many as 7 in 10 teachers assign homework that requires access to the internet. But data from where I work at the Federal Communications Commission suggests as many as 1 in 3 households do not subscribe to broadband due to lack of affordability and lack of interest. So think about those numbers. Where they overlap is what I call the homework gap. And according to the Pew Research Center, the homework gap is real. There are 5 million households out of the 29 million with school-aged children nationwide that are falling into this gap and lack broadband access. So that means if you were a student in a household without broadband today, just getting your nightly homework done is tough. Applying for a scholarship is challenging. And while low-income families are adopting smartphones with internet access at high rates, let me submit to you that a phone is just not how you want to research and type a paper, apply for jobs, or further your education. Another recent study by the Pew Research Center found that more than half of teachers in low-income communities say that their students' lack of access to online resources at home presents a major challenge to integrating technology into their work in the classroom. So not only are students who lack access at home struggling to keep up, their lack of access holds our educational system back. And it means too many young people will go through school without developing the skills that give them a fair chance in the digital age. And that's a problem, because today, just about half of all jobs require some level of digital skills. By the end of the decade, that number is going to be 77%. So school-age children without broadband access at home are not only unable to complete their homework, they enter the job market with a serious handicap. And that loss is more than individual. We need to recognize that it's a loss to our collective human capital and shared economic future that we need to address. We need to address it in McAllen, Texas, where Isabella and Tony and so many other students stake out space on the sidewalk to capture a free Wi-Fi signal just to do their homework. But we can't stop there. We need to address it in Detroit, Michigan, where 7 in 10 students in the city have no way to get online at home, and where students forego eating lunch in order to borrow laptops and rush through nightly homework at school, the one place where they have internet access. We need to address it in Charlotte, North Carolina, where 1 in 5 students have no broadband access at home, and where students are wrestling now with a new curriculum that effectively punishes those students who don't have access to online resources. We need to address it in Cutler Bay, Florida, where night after night parents are lining up for their children so that they can get time online at the library. Now, the wait times are rough, but the need is real, because there are high schools in Miami-Dade County that use digital history textbooks and elementary schools that use an online math program. We also need to address it in Citronelle, Alabama, where after school, students all pile into the local fast food restaurant. They head there because it is one of the few places in town with free Wi-Fi. So students without broadband at home hunker down in the booths to do their homework. They research and write their papers with fizzy drinks and a side of fries. So all across the country, the math may be different, but the homework gap stories are the same. There was a time when access to broadband was a luxury. No more, and nowhere is that as clear as it is in education. So this is a problem we need to address. We need to address it because these are skills every student needs in the new economy. And we need to address it because with digitizing education comes a whole wave of new opportunities for learning, opportunities every student should know, no matter who they are or where they live. All right, so what can we do? Like any challenging school problem, there's no one single solution or quick fix. It's going to take a lot of cooperative effort and a bunch of creative ideas. But here are mine. First, though some of you may know the FCC for its Erate program, which helps schools and libraries get online. Yes, absolutely. We also have a program called Lifeline, which helps connect the home. It's a program that got its start more than 3 decades ago in 1985. You remember 1985? It was when most communications involved a cord, and a certain Californian known as President Reagan was in the White House. Now today, the Lifeline program supports telephone access, voice telephone access, in 13 million low-income households in every state across the country, including right here in California. but it needs a reboot. We need to modernize it. And with your help, we can actually make this happen. Because this month, we are set to vote on updating this program. And when we do, we need to make sure that the Lifeline program is updated to support broadband and to allow participants to choose between applying this support to either broadband or voice service. And that simple change would both update the program and help bring more broadband to low-income households, and in particular, low-income households with students. But if we care about narrowing the homework gap and helping our students, we're not going to stop there. Our Lifeline modernization must make sure that the devices used for Lifeline service are able to access Wi-Fi signals, and that those devices can be turned into Wi-Fi hotspots so they can be used in conjunction with computers. And as we update Lifeline, we have to make sure we are doing everything that we can to make sure that eligible families with school-aged children learn about the program. It's important for families to know about the tools that can help their kids complete homework and give those kids a fair shot at success. Second idea, we need more Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is an essential on-ramp to internet connectivity. More than half of us have relied on public Wi-Fi. I bet more than half of us here have already done that today. But for so many low-income households, it is their only means of getting online. So we need spectrum policy that will make it more possible to have more Wi-Fi in more places, which will provide more ways for more students to get their schoolwork done. And I'm going to nod into Spectrum Geek for a moment and point out we have opportunities to do just that in guard bands in the 600 megahertz band, in the upper portion of the 5 gigahertz band, and in new spectrum frontiers we're exploring now called millimeter wave. We have to seize them, every one of them. It will help democratize internet access and help more kids get their homework done. And third, we also need to keep tabs on innovative broadband programs all across the country. And even though I'm talking to educators right now, no shame, we should copy them. In New York City, for instance, the public library has a public program that loans out wireless hotspots. And last I checked, they've been loaned out thousands of times. Think about what that hotspot can mean for a student who needs online access to complete schoolwork. It's the difference between keeping up in class and falling behind. And even better, similar programs are cropping up now all across the country in cities and towns as diverse as Kansas City, Missouri, and Cherryfield, Maine. Okay, now for a moment, back to Palm Springs, or more accurately, the broader Coachella Valley. Now, I just came earlier this week from South by Southwest, and if you mention Coachella there, everyone thinks it's the fabled music festival that happens in another month or so. But that's not the Coachella I'm talking about. It's actually the community that's built on agriculture. More than half the students there are not fluent in English. They come from Spanish-speaking homes because their parents are migrant farm workers. But when the school superintendent, Daryl Adams, who I think is visiting you here today, he came up with a program to give every child access to a laptop or tablet that they could use at school and home. What he found was he had a problem. The students were hanging out in the school parking lot and by his office as late as 6 p.m. at night, tapping on their devices because it was the only place they had where they could get a reliable wireless signal to do their homework. But he came up with an innovative way to pull them out of the homework gap. He installed Wi-Fi routers on school buses. After all, in a rural community like Coachella, students ride an hour to get to school in the morning and an hour to get home at night. So he turned that ride time into connected time for homework. And even better, the school system parks some of those buses next to the most remote trailer parks in the district, leaving the routers on just a little bit longer so the students have yet more time to connect. And this is creative, and it's happening right down the road. But even better, connected school buses like these are hitting the road in Huntsville, Alabama, Marengo, Indiana, and a whole bunch of communities in between. So here's where I get optimistic. We've given this problem, the homework gap, a name. We're getting innovative, and we're getting creative, and we're coming up with solutions. We're recognizing that there are communities that are caught in the transition from the analog era to the digital age. And as we navigate this change in our civic and commercial life, we are taking steps to make sure every student has a fair shot in the 21st century. Okay, but this optimism, it's got another source, because this problem is finally getting the attention it deserves. Last month, Isabella and Tony and McAllen, Texas, were featured on the front page of the New York Times in a story that was all about the homework gap. And last week, President Obama featured their story in a posting on Facebook. And all of this attention comes not at a moment too soon, because this is about the future. The future of our economy, our country, and our success is built on a digital and diverse workforce. We all know that science, technology, engineering, and math are the fastest growing fields in the new economy. We also know the diversity of our STEM workforce does not reflect the diversity of our population. It's time to fix this and make all of our kids, not just digital consumers, but digital creators. And there are a lot of things we need to do to make this happen. But a small step, and one we can take right now, is to make it possible for all students to do their homework. Because the homework gap is the cruelest part of our new digital divide, but I believe it's within our power to bridge it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was furiously taking notes. If you watched me, I was not texting. I was just taking notes. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that.
All right, do you have any questions?
Certainly we can. We have a little bit of time left over, and so if there are questions in the audience, our illustrious co-chairs of the Legislative Advocacy Committee, John Fleshman and Vinitha Chandrasekhar, are here to, as I refer to it, Donahue it, and run out and hand you the microphone. So would you mind, John, if I impose upon the two of you? One of you can spot, one of you can run. So do we have any questions for the commissioner? Don't be shy. I know it's the afternoon.
Start with you.
If the FCC gets the change approved for internet for the families as a lifeline, how long would that take to get to the students?
To get to the students. It is, well, I'm an impatient optimist. So I'm going to suggest to you that if we could vote on it this month, we will move it through the paperwork process in Washington, and it will be in effect some point by the start of next year. I would like it to be sooner, so we're going to make every effort to make that happen, because anyone who's in a classroom today knows how great the need is. So I'm certainly going to go back and impress on my colleagues that we can make this happen as soon as possible.
Hello. I'm in a community that I don't even think 3 of our 10 students have internet access. It's even lower than that. And so my question, when you're talking about bringing Wi-Fi to the community, is there money available that will allow that to happen? Because we're so economically disadvantaged that we're providing breakfast and lunch and jackets and backpacks and supplies for the kids, and so there's really not much left over from the families to do that.
So the dominant program we have, thank you for the question, and I don't think your experience is unique. We've got lots of communities around the country where that's true. The primary program we have to support more Wi-Fi access right now is the E-rate program itself, which, as you probably know, was reformed in the last year or so that we have more funds available, and those funds can be spent on Wi-Fi routers, both at schools and libraries. So I'd encourage you to look into that. I do think it's also important to make sure that as we zone our skies for what we can do with our mobile phones, we make sure we save more slices of it for the spectrum that gets used for Wi-Fi, so that not only can we deploy more Wi-Fi in more places, that Wi-Fi has more capacity over time because the demands will be greater. But I definitely encourage you to look at what the reformed E-rate program can do, because it's pretty dramatic with respect to Wi-Fi for both schools and libraries.
Our school district in Central California pursued mobile connections for our students in E-rate 1.0, and that pretty clearly in 2.0 isn't supported anymore. So do you foresee any changes when you spoke about the hotspots to E-rate supporting something like that, mobile connections for students at home?
That's a good point. This issue comes up over and over again as the boundaries between inside school and outside school are breaking down. I think one of our challenges is that we have a law from 1996 that governs this program. And 1996, I don't know about you, but I called the internet the information superhighway. What we called broadband back then was awfully slow compared to what we do today. And one of the legislative and regulatory challenges is that there are a lot of references in the statute right now to classrooms. So we're going to have to look hard at that statute and see if we can find ways to think about how it can support learning outside of the classroom. And that's been a little bit of a struggle in our legal review. But I take your point that it's evolving, and we're going to have to figure out over time how the program can evolve to reflect what you're describing.
Commissioner, thank you for coming. My question would be that as the nexus between school and home shrinks due to ever-increasing connectivity, do you think there will be ever a change to E-rate where the school can use those resources to push access out into the community?
I think this issue is going to come up over and over again, and we're going to have to reassess it. I think the statute still is a little bit challenging because it's got so many references to classrooms in it. Because it contemplated learning in the classroom, connectivity in the classroom. But we live in a wireless era where everything's mobile. So we're going to have to digest those realities and see how they fit in the statute from 1996. And I think that's a task that is definitely headed our way.
Are there any other questions for the Commissioner? Got it.
I think a lot of school districts are redefining the definition of classroom.
I know.
Yeah, as we move into online and blended learning.
I wanted to know, who do we write for the Lifeline program, so I can make all of my students write to that person to make the changes.
Love it. I love it. By the way, there's nothing like getting advocacy from students. When we were working on reforming the E-rate program, we got lots of advocacy from lots of big and important folks all around the country, but nothing was as important as hearing from the students themselves. So I will leave it to my good friends at CUE to explain to you how to participate, but I want you to know I think it's really awesome when you encourage your students to write to Washington to ask for changes and get things done. We do pay attention, and it's really meaningful.
It's actually a question we anticipated. And so on the screen, I have pictures of our advocacy committee, John Fleshman and Vinitha Chandrasekhar. And this is precisely what CUE does on your behalf as members. We do calls to action. We send out emails and alerts to encourage you to contact your legislator or have your students write letters, in some cases even fax. I know it sounds old school, but we still find some value when we fax those things out. So we've set up in the past with our partners at ISTE, they have given us tools as the ISTE affiliate to help send messages that you can customize with your stories to explain why it's so crucial, why it's so essential for this policy to change or the statute to change and redefine, in this case, what we're talking about, classroom, and some of the other pieces too. So we had actually put this slide together to say, watch for calls to action, watch for petitions that we will put out with an encouragement for you to sign to support the changes that the commissioner is discussing and that talks about within the Q advocacy framework. So we do have that functionality, that capability. It's funded by your dues and attendance at this event. So if you want to get more involved, we have membership on this committee that's available to anyone who's a Q member, and you just got to talk to John and Vinitha and see if there's a spot for you to fill in. So watch for more information on that, and keep your email inbox clear so you can watch for those alerts as they come in. How many of you, right? Inbox 0? Anyone else? No, just me? Okay, all right. Other questions, John?
We have one more question back here, and I believe Superintendent Torlakson has a comment.
Thank you for coming. You just addressed some of the legislative advocacy, but one of the hindrances, especially here in California, is that schools are funded by ADA, kids in the classroom. But as was just stated, the classroom's changing. It's not 4 walls and desks. Is this something that the FCC can contribute to, or is this something you guys might look at, not just E-rate, which is changing and potentially the funding is going to be limited, but working towards changing those ADA funding so that we can provide these resources with funds lost because Johnny's not in school today?
Yeah. It's the same story that I think I've been talking about before. We have a statute from 1996 that makes multiple references to the classroom, and it didn't really contemplate the world we have today. As you described, the walls around classrooms are coming down. We're going to have to try to wrestle with that reality going forward, but it would probably require a statutory update to really do it properly, and that would be left up to Congress. I think, though, over time we should collect more information about this so we have data that reflects how schools are using connectivity today, how students are using connectivity, and we can actually talk a little bit more to some of our members of Congress who oversee this program and give them some ideas about how to update it.
And from Q's perspective, we've been working on that issue for several years. The language in California law and Ed Code is very tied to independent study when it comes to online learning. And when you could speak to this better than I could, I'm certain, but we worked with then Senator and Assemblymember Torlakson to actually try to get legislation through to make those adjustments. But I will yield my time to the superintendent to speak to that. We've just not been as successful as we'd hoped to get that language shifted away from tying it specifically to independent study and the very onerous attendance requirements that you have to jump through to be able to call something online learning and get credit for it. So I didn't mean to step on your remarks, Superintendent.
Not a bit, Mike, but thanks for all the leadership. And Commissioner, thank you for your leadership. It's just been incredible. And I think the moment is here for the kind of shift in thinking. We recently visited a school in Sacramento, the Met, and there weren't any students or teachers around because they were out. They're doing career technical education, they're at job sites, they're learning. They had to change the MOU with the district to allow teachers also the flexibility to work off campus, work different hours than the standard 8 to 4 or 8 to 3. So I appreciate that leadership, and I think we will need to redouble our efforts. Where do you see the resistance coming? Is there a partisan issue here, or is it just the capacity or budget issue? Classrooms are
good
not
question.
in the boundaries of
Well, first
schools.
of all, I want to say I've actually been to the Met in
Yes.
Sacramento.
Yes.
And it's one of those schools that looks nothing like what I experienced. And you see how they are modernizing the classroom, moving it beyond the 4 walls, getting the students involved in the community. And it remakes everything you think about education in a way that feels so dynamic because the students, the parents, and the teachers at that school are so invested in it. It was really amazing to see. I think as I mentioned here, we have a statute from 1996. That's a problem. I think another problem, and I'll be very candid, is we have a program where the demand has historically exceeded the supply of available dollars. So the challenge is, even though we've been able to increase the budget to $3.9 billion annually, that's an increase of $1.5 billion, which is, in the way that Washington is operating right now, kind of epic. We have to make sure that we can use that program to reach all schools and as many schools as we can. And we certainly recognize that if we start competing with those dollars with demands for at home, we're going to diminish what E-rate can do today. So that's why I've focused a lot on this Lifeline program, because it's a program that's directly associated with the home and could be modernized in a way that makes it real different for low-income families with school-aged children. And I think right now, that is the program we need to modernize most. And we're going to have to figure out over time how to marry these two programs, make more sense of them, and make them recognize that the classroom isn't strictly the classroom anymore.
Well, thanks again for your leadership in taking Lifeline and taking the E-rate and expanding it. I, for one, would be in favor of increasing the amount we collect through E-rate, but that's not going to happen next year. But working with our congressional delegation, we'll work with you, Mike. I think we need just to redouble our efforts. And there's a new group of congressmen and women from California, for instance, that get technology, Eric Swalwell, Mark DeSaulnier. I think they would be eager to jump in and work for some bipartisan solutions here. So thanks again. We're investing $1.5 billion in California in career technical education. A lot of it's not going to be in the four walls of the school.
Right.
It's going to be thousands of students out learning firsthand at the work site what the new economy is all about. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you once again for coming all the way out to Palm Springs. And
not a hardship.
the hardship, I appreciate taking that on. Let's have a round of applause for Commissioner Rosenworcel one last time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.